Hi, how you doing? Yesterday I went on social media and I was reminded that on today, October 7th, the announcement for this year's winner for the Nobel Prize for Literature was going to be announced. So naturally lots of people were speculating about who was going to win it, what author, and one of the bookie's favorites was the French writer Annie Ernaux. So I first read Annie Ernaux's writing a couple of years ago with the years when it was shortlisted for the International Booker Prize, and I just completely fell in love with her style of writing and the way she writes about memory and history and blends in personal experience into that in such a meaningful way. I think is so powerful, and I've been wanting to read more of her work, and more of her work has been being translated into English and published here in the UK by Fitzcarraldo Editions. And just earlier this year, a new translation of her book, Simple Passion, was just published. And so I was sort of reminded that I hadn't read this yet and been wanting to get to it. And this was first published in French back in the early 90s, I think around 92. But yeah, it's just been translated into English earlier this year. And I thought, how cool would it be to read this book before the announcement of the Nobel Prize for Literature, and then I can say I've just read a book by this author that just won the Nobel Prize. And I wasn't all that busy this morning, and it's a very short book. It is just under 50 pages long, so that is perfectly manageable. And yeah, and I just read it, and so I thought I would give my thoughts and impressions about it. Of course, it didn't work out that Annie Ernaux won the Nobel Prize for Literature. That was won by Abdulrazak Gurnah, who's a fantastic writer. I really love this novel, By the Sea, and would highly recommend it. It's about the experience of an asylum seeker that comes to England, and it is such a poignant and really powerful book. And so, yeah, I'd recommend this as well. But yeah, the book, because I just read it, that I want to talk about is Simple Passion. And this is a book and subject matter that just completely gripped me, because it is all about a passionate love affair that the narrator slash author has, and writing about that, but not so much about the details of that or any sort of judgment of whether it's a good or a bad thing that had happened, but just really describing the experience of it and what this passion means in our lives. And if you've ever had this feeling in your life or had an affair like this, you'll know what it means. And I could relate to it so much instantly when she was describing how for her it just completely consumed her life, when it was happening, when this affair was going on, that was the central thing in her life, and everything else was sort of taking place in the wings, in the periphery of the experience of meeting friends or going about her work or her daily life or going to cultural things. That was all sort of in the background, and at the forefront of her mind was this affair she was having and the man that she was focusing on. And so, yeah, she just describes that so vividly and really captures that experience. And something I think is so fascinating about the way that this author writes is how she's almost trying to make up the structure of her book as she's going along, and she does that very strongly in the years as well, but also in this book. And so fairly early on, she describes how I'll just get to the passage where I felt I was living out my passion in the manner of a novel, but now I'm not sure in which style I am writing about it, whether in the style of a testimony or possibly even the sort of confidence that can be found in women's magazines, maybe a manifesto or a statement, or perhaps a critical commentary. And so it's she's kind of making up as she goes along how she's going to frame this experience and to get into the heart of this subject matter that she's writing about. And for, I think, most writers, that would almost seem like too self-conscious a way of going about writing about a particular theme or an account of one's experience. But in Ernaux's writing, I think it's almost just a honest way of really getting into like the center of what she's talking about, and I find that really refreshingly honest and really meaningful. The style of the narrative changes over the course of the book in the use of tense, so that at the beginning of the book it's written in the past tense when she's writing this account of the affair, and then towards the end of the book it rejoins into a sort of present tense. And I think this is like reflective of the experience of being caught up in passion in the way I described earlier, where you're almost outside of everyday experience when you're in passion, because you're thinking about your lover, you're remembering certain details, and you're just like so much in your head that it's like you're caught in the past and the moments you had with your lover, and also caught in the future because you're thinking about when you're gonna meet that lover again. But then when towards the end of the book it gets into the present, and it's like she's rejoined the flow of life, and so she's able to enjoy everyday experiences again and is in the present moment and can fully inhabit it in that way when she's not so caught up in this passion, which is all-consuming and takes control of her life in a way. And it's interesting how she withholds giving too many personal details about the lover that's at the focus and at the heart of this book, and that's partly because, as she says in the text, she wants to respect his privacy, and he is a married man, and she doesn't want to reveal that, and feels that when they went into this affair, he didn't sort of go into it expecting to have a book written about him, and that's also not really the point of the book. The point of the book is describing the passion itself rather than the man, though we do find out about him that he's not a native of France, and he doesn't speak French all that well, and so there's this sort of language barrier between them. I mean, they're able to communicate, but no, not in a fluent way, and this almost becomes part of his like mystique, I think, and a way how the way that we idealize our lovers when we're caught up in the flow of passion. And I always find this really curious how we can feel like they're the greatest person in the world, but then much later, and when we're outside of passion, we realize in retrospect that actually they're probably not the greatest person, and we can find we can make critical comments about them, which we're just kind of blind to when we're caught up in the midst of passion. And I appreciated how Ernaux is really withholding judgment about both her own affair or like affairs in general, and because she really doesn't seem to know whether it was a good thing or a bad thing, and is not placing judgment on that way, and really isn't certain about what the truth is of this man or of the relationship that they had with each other. And the only thing she is certain of is their desire between them. And she describes this in a very funny way, where she writes, "I would only ever be certain of one thing, his desire or lack of desire. The only undeniable truth could be glimpsed by looking at his penis." So that's a very forward way of putting that. Yeah, that's all she can really know about him as a truth, or that's the only like fact she knows about them. But what she is really certain of is about the excruciating feeling she had in the interim periods between their meetings with each other. And so we don't even really get many details of their meetings and their encounters with each other. It's more about these periods in between when she's longing for him or thinking about him or sees a detail of something that reminds her of him. And it's like that song, "Losing My Mind," of the coffee cup, I think about you. And so, this a subject which has been covered, ad nauseum. But I think the way that Ernaux focuses on this as a subject of the passion itself rather than the actual details of the affair, it speaks much more about like broader subjects to do with time and memory and the imagination, and how this is all tied up with these feelings of passion. And this isn't like a sweet or saccharine account of this. She describes really vividly like the destructive effects it has upon her life, and how it can almost turn into a self-destructive thing, and how at one point she even goes to revisit a location where she had an abortion earlier in her life, hoping that the pain of this encounter with this physical place will replace the pain she's feeling because of the torment of this love affair. And it's interesting because I read about this account of her abortion that she wrote about really poignantly and meaningfully in her book Happening, where she describes this, where she had to sort of go to have this abortion done under the radar because it wasn't legal at the time. So yeah, I found this a very powerful book as well, and I wasn't expecting this to be tied into this book Simple Passion in this way, and so yeah, it's really upsetting reading those sections where she's describing this sort of self-destructive mental behavior that she's going through. But I think she does so because she's really testifying to the absolute power and of this passion which completely consumes her life. And it's sort of a continuing mystery about the state of such passion, because she ultimately judges at the end of the book that both this man that she had an affair with and the passion itself is ultimately meaningless. And I think she comes to that conclusion because when we get to a point where we're fully inhabiting the present and can look at an affair and this passion in a more objective way, we can come to this conclusion of like, well, what was that all about? Like, why did that consume my life so much? And but that this happens, and it's a part of life, and it's something that happens to almost all of us, and I think that's so fascinating, and how she frames that continuing and ongoing mystery of how passion affects us this way in our lives. And so yeah, I found this a very powerful book, especially because it is such a short read. And so yeah, I'd really recommend it if you're interested in exploring this subject matter, because I think she does so in a really dynamic and interesting way. But if you've read this book, or if you've read anything else by Annie Ernaux, I would love to hear about it in the comments below and discuss it with you, because yeah, I think she's like becoming or maybe already is like one of my favorite writers, and one day maybe she will win the Nobel Prize. We'll just have to wait and see in the coming years. But thank you for watching my rambling talk about this, and I will speak to you again soon. Bye bye.